There's no place like Rhône. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the Northern Rhone region of France and the 5 top AOCs within the Northern Rhone region of France that are known for red wine production. After that, I'm going to be identifying a number of my favorite cellar defenders in the Northern Rhone region of France. For those of you who are new to my channel, you may be wondering what a cellar defender is. Well, in simple terms, a cellar defender is a wine that's reasonably priced, but yet which is sufficiently interesting that you'll always enjoy it, and which will prevent you from indulging in the temptation to open up a more expensive bottle that you should be aging in your cellar. By should be aging, I mean a wine that has not yet entered its drinking window and which will only continue to improve such that it would be a shame for you to open it now. But before we get into the cellar defender discussion, I'm going to start out by explaining a little bit of background information about the Northern Rhone region of France. While the Northern Rhone and the Southern Rhone are not that far apart geographically, they have many differences with respect to wine production. First, the Northern Rhone has a continental climate, where the Southern Rhone has a Mediterranean climate. In terms of red grapes, the Northern Rhone is known for Syrah, and that's the only permitted red varietal, whereas in the Southern Rhone they have Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, and a number of other permitted varietals. The Northern Rhone region is also much smaller in terms of area under vine. Only 6% of the vineyards are located in the Northern Rhone, where 94% of the vineyards within the Rhone are located in the south. I'm now just going to briefly go through each of the 5 top AOCs in the Northern Rhone for red production. The Northern Rhone is not monolithic, and there's key distinctions within each of these AOCs. These differences impact the wine in your glass, the pricing structure, as well as whether or not you have to age these wines for additional time in the bottle, and if so, for how long. So by understanding a little bit about each of these AOCs, you'll be able to make better purchasing decisions, both with respect to the wines that I'm discussing in this video, and then also when you're at the store or the restaurant and you're trying to make a selection, but they don't have one of these particular names that's on this list. The first AOC that I'll be discussing is Cote Rotie. Cote Rotie is the farthest north AOC in the Northern Rhone region of France. It's also the coolest, so it's the source of some excellent cool climate Syrah. This is an area where it would ordinarily be difficult for Syrah to ripen because it's so cool. However, the vineyards are located on the slopes along the Rhône River. These slopes are very steep, and the aspect is facing east and west, and this helps the vineyards to intercept sunlight in the day, and it also shields them somewhat from the strong mistral winds that come from the north. The mistral winds do help to prevent fungal disease, which is useful, and they also thicken the skins, but they do reduce yields somewhat, which results in lower volumes and potentially more expensive pricing. The Rhône River reflects sunlight up to the vineyards, which helps them ripen. There are rocky soils. These rocky soils absorb heat during the day and then radiate that heat to the vineyards at night, which helps them to continue to ripen. But because of these steep slopes that the vineyards are located in, most of the vineyard work has to be done by hand, which raises costs for the wines. There's only about 250 hectares of vineyards planted in the Cote Rotie region. Of course, the red wines are based on Syrah, but interestingly enough, in Cote Rotie, producers are allowed to co-ferment Viognier, which is a white grape, along with their Syrah. Producers that do that find that it gives the wines a little bit of an aromatic lift and a little bit more freshness, and I tend to really enjoy it. Typically it's no more than 8%, but there are some producers that go a little bit higher than that, and some prefer not to use it at all. Along with Hermitage and Cornas, Cote Rotie is considered to be one of the most prestigious regions in the Northern Rhone region of France, and for that reason the wines tend to be more expensive. Cote Rotie is softer and more elegant than Cornas and Hermitage, and it's also a little bit more aromatic. It's definitely one of my favorites. Hermitage is another high-quality AOC in the Northern Rhone region of France. Hermitage is even smaller than Cote Rotie, with only about 137 hectares under vine. It's located on south-facing slopes that help to maximize sun exposure and protect the vineyards from the northern winds. The vineyards are hot and dry with stony soils. This results in very low yields in wines that are concentrated, tannic, and intense. These are wines that generally need a number of years of bottle age, at least 10 to 15 years or more, to show their best. Cornas is an AOC in the Northern Rhone that's located the furthest south, so it's the closest to Châteauneuf-du-Pape. As such, the climate is more Mediterranean than the rest of the Northern Rhone region, and the grapes here tend to ripen first. Cornas is generally an amphitheater with south and west facing exposure. As such, the vineyards tend to have extremely favorable sun exposure, and the grapes are able to ripen consistently year in and year out. Like Hermitage, the wines from this region are known for their structure and for being intense and concentrated. concentrated. As such, these wines also benefit from some bottle age after release. The Saint-Joseph AOC was expanded in the 1990s, and with this expansion, there were some flatter vineyard areas that were included, and unfortunately, these areas aren't as suitable for high-quality wine production as the areas on the slopes. As a result, there could be some wide variations in quality from Saint-Joseph. You can have some very light wines that tend to be inexpensive and may go well with poultry, but you can also have some excellent wines, especially from the slopes that are to the north, which can produce wines that are almost as strong as Cote Rotie. But whenever you're dealing with Saint-Joseph, it's very important to be selective. In Saint-Joseph, they are permitted to add white wines such as Marsanne and Roussanne to the Syrah, but as a practical matter, this is not done very frequently. Crozes-Hermitage is the largest AOC in the Northern Rhone, with 1,700 hectares under vine. This was an AOC that, like Saint-Joseph, was also expanded beyond its original borders. As a result, you also have some variation in quality here. So with respect to Crozes-Hermitage, it's also very important to be selective. In the north, the weather's a little bit cooler and you have a lot more slopes that are ideal for the production of high-quality wines. In the south, there's flatter land and the land is more fertile than in the north. For that reason, most of the higher quality wines tend to come from the north. But like Saint-Joseph, Crozes-Hermitage is an excellent area for bargain hunting, as there are many compelling values in both Crozes-Hermitage and Saint-Joseph. With that by way of background, we're ready to get into the cellar defenders. And I've got at least one cellar defender from each of the 5 AOCs discussed above. The first cellar defender from the Northern Rhone region of France that I'm recommending is the Guigal Cote Rotie Brunette Blonde, which sells for about $75. Guigal is one of my favorite producers, and it's a legendary producer in the Northern Rhone region of France. The La wines, La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landon, often sell for about $400 to $500 or more on release, and even Chateau d'Ampuis is creeping up in price and is now oftentimes $120 or more. So this one will give you some exposure to Guigal and an introduction to their outstanding Cote Roties at about $75. This wine is 96% Syrah and 4% Viognier. It's made from vineyard plots located in both the Cote Brute and the Cote Blonde. So these two areas have varying soils and they're able to gain complexity in this blend by combining them. This wine is produced from vines that average about 35 years of age. It's aged for 36 months in oak, half of which is new. This is an excellent wine with finesse and character that will give you an excellent introduction into Guigal's wines and their excellent Cote Roties. And it will also help to keep you from raiding your stash of Lala wines or even your Chateau d'Ampuis. The next cellar defender from the Northern Rhone region of France that I'm recommending comes from the Cornas AOC. Specifically, I'm talking about the Domaine J.L Cornas. This is a wine that's available for about $70 to $75 on pre-release for the 2020 vintage. Domaine J.L is a family-owned winery that dates back to the 1600s. This wine is 100% Syrah. In Cornas, they're not allowed to add white wine to the Syrah like they are in some other AOCs. This particular wine comes from fruit that's grown in the cooler area of Cornas towards the north. This vineyard is located at 250 meters above sea level on terraces with decomposed granite soils. Domaine J.L only has about 1.2 hectares of vineyards in Cornas, so they produce only about 5,000 bottles of this wine. This one may be difficult to locate as a result, but it is definitely worth seeking out, and if you can find it, I highly recommend it. My next Northern Rhone cellar defender comes from another legendary producer. For more than 500 years, Domaine J.L has been producing outstanding wine in the Northern Rhone region of France. Historically, the Hermitage vineyards were controlled by the elite and the very wealthy. However, the phylloxera outbreak in the 19th century created a rare opportunity for the Chaves to purchase some prime vineyard land in Hermitage. The Chave seized this opportunity and purchased almost 7 hectares of vineyards in the most desirable portion of Hermitage. Today, the 16th generation of Chaves, namely J.L. Chave, is in charge of the winery. Chave's approach is characterized by minimal intervention. There's no chemicals in the vineyard. Harvesting is done exclusively by hand. They ferment with ambient yeast. They don't do any filtering, and they use only modest amounts of new oak for aging. While Chave is most famous for their outstanding Hermitage, that wine is now more than $300 a bottle, and so today the cellar defender that I'm recommending is the Domaine J.L. Chave Saint-Joseph. Joseph, which sells for about $80 to $85. For those looking for a more affordable option, Chave also has a Saint Joseph called Offerus, which sells for closer to $35 to $40. That's also an excellent choice and one that I would recommend, especially if you're at a restaurant. If you're getting value from these recommendations, please tap that like button so this video gets distributed to more viewers, and please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next one. It really does help me out a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of selecting wines based on the producer and the quality of the producer. These next two wines that I'm going to be discussing together are another example of that. Alain Graillot is a well-revered producer in the Crozes-Hermitage area. Domaine Alain Graillot was started in 1985 after Alain finished working for the outstanding Burgundy producer Domaine J.L. Unfortunately, Alain passed away earlier this year, but his two sons have been running the operation since about 2008 and are doing an excellent job as well. Alain Graillot uses organic farming principles, hand harvesting, whole cluster fermentation, and they age their wines in used French oak. For this producer, I'm recommending two cellar defenders, since they have multiple options that are worth purchasing depending on your price point. The Crozes-Hermitage Rouge from Alain Graillot sells for about $35 or so. This is 100% Syrah from 30-year-old vines. This wine doesn't require as much aging as many Northern Rhone wines. You can enjoy this one younger with a healthy decant. The second cellar defender I'm recommending from Alain Graillot in Crozes-Hermitage is the Guigal. This is also 100% Syrah, and it's made in the same way as the Rouge I just discussed. The difference is that this wine is a barrel selection. So Alain Graillot selects some of the top barrels from each particular vintage and then bottles that separately as the Guigal. So this one is definitely a step up in quality and concentration, but the price tag is higher as well. So this one will cost you about $70 to $75 or so. Domaine J.L Hermitage La Maison Bleue is my next cellar defender from the Northern Rhone region of France. This one sells for anywhere between $60 and $75, depending on where you locate it. This one can help you from digging into your stash of La Chapelle too soon. This wine comes from fruit that's grown on the east side of Hermitage, facing the river. Many of the most famous vineyards from Hermitage are on the other side, the west side, and that's why you get a little bit of a price break, with this one being $60 to $75 versus well over $200 for La Chapelle. This is 100% Syrah. They use only about 15% new oak, and so that definitely results in a wine that you're able to enjoy a little bit younger than many of the wines that I'm discussing today, and certainly much younger than many Hermitage wines. They handle this one in exactly the same way as the iconic La Chapelle bottling, and so it is an ideal cellar defender for the La Chapelle. This wine is full-bodied with dark fruit and some power, but it can also be a little bit opulent and refined. It is better with a few years of bottle age, but you can enjoy it much younger than many Hermitage wines. M. Chapoutier produces the next cellar defender from the Northern Rhone region of France, and specifically I'm talking about the M. Chapoutier Le Granit Saint Joseph. This one sells for about $70. It's consistently one of my favorite wines from Saint Joseph. It's a full-bodied wine that can be enjoyed young, but which will age for up to 15 years. Descriptors for this wine include blackberry, granite, and crushed rock. It has a silky, velvety texture. I recently saw the 2020 available on pre-arrival for about $65, so that's certainly an excellent value for this wine. Domaine Faury is a small family-owned winery that produces about 7,000 cases of wine annually. Unlike Guigal and many others in the Cote Rotie region of France, Domaine Faury does not embrace substantial percentages of new oak for its aging regimen. Domaine Faury is an advocate of minimal intervention in the winery. The result is wines that are rustic yet elegant. The Domaine Faury Cote Rotie is about 93% Syrah and 7% Viognier. It's aged for 18 months in 600-liter and 220-liter barrels, only 30% of which are new. This is a different style than Guigal, but it's definitely one that I think you enjoy and which I recommend. The next two cellar defenders from the Northern Rhone region that I'm recommending also come from Cote Rotie, this time from producer Bernard Lévy. This domain produces only about 12 to 15,000 bottles of wine annually, so it's a very, very small producer. They have about 3.5 hectares, all of which are located in Cote Rotie. These are wines that are very, very structured and which definitely benefit from bottle age after release. They show significant improvement in time. Their entry-level wine is the Cote Rotie, This is a blend from all their parcels that they have within the Cote Rotie appellation. It's the most approachable wine that they have. It can be enjoyed a little bit earlier than their single vineyard wines. This one sells for about $65 to $70. I'm also a big fan of the La Chave. Only about 2,400 bottles of this wine are sent to the United States annually, so it's definitely one you may have to seek out a little bit, but it's very well worth it. This is described as a ferocious wine that is unique in its uninhibited expression of the smells and flavors of the appellation. It's too wild and intense for some, but if you're a fan of the Cote Rotie region like I am, I think you will really enjoy it, and it's definitely one that I highly recommend that you try. This one sells for about $90, so it's definitely a step up, but it's a step up in intensity and quality as well. My next wine cellar defender from the Northern Rhone region of France comes from Saint-Joseph. Specifically, I'm talking about the Guigal, Saint-Joseph, Rouge. This is a wine that's from the vineyard that gave Saint-Joseph its name. It's 100% Syrah. The average vine age is anywhere from 20 to 75 years old. This wine is powerful and spicy with polished tannins. It's better with 2 to 3 years of bottle age on it, and it can age for up to 10 years or so. This one sells for about $70. If you're interested in the Southern Rhone, be sure to check out my Wine Cellar Defender video that I did on the Southern Rhone region of France, which is linked above.